Do you remember this lovable, harmless little fuzzball? I should just probably leave this up there for the rest of the video, but I'll take it down. Do you all remember Rush? I know most of you do. Do you remember the first time that you ever heard him? I do. Rush changed everything. And I want to talk about that. I remember the first time that I ever heard Rush Limbaugh. And it wasn't when he first started in his nationally syndicated. You know, I'd heard him a little bit in Kansas City when he was a DJ, and I talked about him the other day on I think on another channel when he worked for the Royals. But I didn't come to him until a couple years after he'd been on. He came on in his national syndication, I think, in 1988, and I bet it was about 1990 that I started listening to him. My mother told me about him, which is funny because she was a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, but conservative in her views, but one of those that just wouldn't admit that she wasn't what the Democrat Party was becoming. And she told me about this guy, Rush, and I thought, what a funny name. What the kind of deal is that? And so I listened to him. I was sitting in my office. I owned my gym at the time. Sitting in my office doing some workup, doing some marketing and some advertising. And those of you who have owned businesses of your own know the challenges that are in running a business. And you really start to become aware when you're not just a wage slave, when you're not just, working for somebody else and seeing the taxes taken out, never getting the check of the gross, just seeing the net, and you start thinking that that's what you're making. But when you own your own businesses and you get all the money and then you've got to pay that money out, and you see where it's going on wasted government programs and corruption and things like that, that really, really starts to wake you up. Well, I remember, so I'm sitting in there and I'm working on some ad layouts, and I said, oh, this guy that my mother was telling me about, he's on. I'm going to turn him on. So I turn on the radio. My world opened up. Now, it's not that I was hearing things. He wasn't saying things that I hadn't thought about myself or that were new to me, but it was the first time that I heard anybody in media saying the things that I thought. And I know so many people had exactly the same response when they started listening to Rush. Here is finally a guy who says the things I've been thinking and feeling. It was, the rising of the sun, the breath of fresh air, the rejuvenation of hope. If you'll remember at that time, it was, we had been coming out of the Reagan years, but still the Democrats were driving, which means the liberals were driving the narrative. And up until that time, those of you who are old enough to remember, there had not been a conservative voice in the media. Fox, which started out fairly conservative, not so much anymore. Fox was still years away. Rush was the only voice. There had been conservative voices out there before, but they were just they were aggressive. They did not engage people with a reasonableness, an explanation of their positions. The lovable little fuzzball that Rush always claimed to be, which he wasn't. But Joe Pine was one, and I forget there were some others, Downey. But they were ones that although they did bring a message to a lot of people that wanted to hear the echo chamber, they didn't engage people outside, their belief systems. They just did not pull them in. There was nothing out there of this size that Rush Limbaugh brought to the table. He changed it all. He changed everything. Single-handedly, he changed the political landscape of America by doing two things. By bolstering those who already believed in conservative principles and giving them the feeling that they were no longer alone, except, among their friends or family, or if their friends and family shared their beliefs or views. And then also brought other people in to listen to him, and through his explanations, his reasonable demeanor. Now he did a few things in the beginning years that just kind of made you want to cringe. Do you remember the Mary Jo Kopechne references that he made, and then the abortion references that he made? You could argue that those were not particularly helpful, and I'll have to say I myself kind of cringed at that, because in my opinion they were destroying his relatability to a lot of people that I think could have been pulled in and to his messages. But that notwithstanding, he changed everything. Did I complete my thought? Yes. So he bolstered, he gave foundation to those who already felt that way. But then he also brought other people in an entertaining way. Not there had been conservatives, Buckley, Goldwater. Those, Goldwater was a rock-ribbed Republican conservative. If you want conservatism, go back to Goldwater. But as smart as these guys were, they didn't engage the masses. That was not the only brilliance of Rush, but one of his many brilliances. As he established this, he set the way for people that came along later, much later. If it hadn't been for Rush, people like O'Reilly, who I'm not a big fan of, I don't consider him a conservative, like Hannity, I'm also not a big fan of anymore. I used to kind of like Hannity, but he's, no, not so much. Tucker. Okay. There would not have been. Rush built a foundation on which other people then were able to come out and bring forward the conservative message. And that began the conservative movement of modern day, to the extent that it's a conservative movement. And much of the conservative movement has failed, and it's become a moderate, to the point to where the real conservatives are now looked at, askance by those who consider themselves reasonable. Well, he set it up for the changing of the governmental system. I don't know, for those of you who may not be old enough to remember, and most of you are, I think, back before then, we had three news channels, ABC, NBC, CBS. You had a half-hour news of national news every evening and a half-hour of local news. And whatever Walter Cronkite and Howard K. Smith and those said, which was pretty much the same thing, people thought that was the truth. And, of course, they were spouting the government line. It was when Cronkite started to question the Vietnam War. That was a watershed moment in modern media. But Rush set the foundation, and you may not realize that when Newt Gingrich brought in the contract with America in 1994, he won a Republican majority in the House for the first time in 40 years. For 40 years, there had been a lock on Congress, a Democrat lock on Congress. The Republicans did not have a majority in the House or the Senate. And so no matter if we had some Republican presidents, nothing was getting done that the Democrats didn't want. There had not been a Republican-controlled House of Representatives since 1954. 54, the year after I was born. From 54 to 94, complete Democrat control. We had some things. Nixon got a few things done. He also got some things done that he, shouldn't have. And I don't necessarily mean Watergate. Reagan was able to get some things done. He was called the great communicator. But he didn't get a lot of things done that he could have if he had had Republican support, not the kind of Republican support we have nowadays. But Tip O'Neill took him to the cleaners a couple of times. If you all remember what TEFRA was, the Tax Equity and Financial or Fiscal Responsibility Act. So Reagan always acted in good faith. He was a good man. And but because the other side, the Democrats, were always sneaky, like they are, he didn't get done what he couldn't have gotten done. It wasn't until 1994 that Republicans took back control of the House. And since then, I'm not a Republican, I would say the more conservative faction has had control, it's gone back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, and in the Senate and the House. So things actually are much better now than they ever were, except the fact that Democrats in the past were pretty much like Republicans are now. And so you could say that today's Republicans were, the Democrats of the 1960s. JFK would be a stalwart Republican now. His not just his fiscal plan, his fiscal platform, but his social platform was almost identical to Reagan. People don't realize that. The problem is that as things have moved to the left, today's Republicans are what yesterday's Democrats used to be, and today's Democrats are what communists have always been. So we now have a communist party and a liberal party, peppered with a few conservatives. Here's my point, that Rush is the one. Let me hold his picture up, because I know you all would love to see him again. Wouldn't you love to have him back? I mean, that's his first book, The Way Things Ought to Be. His second book, See, I Told You So. What an amazing person, right? I used to buy all these books that I could. I'd go past half-price books, and I'd go past. They used to have a dollar section, and anytime I found one of his books, I'd buy it for $1, and I'd also buy Bibles. And then I would leave Bibles, and I would leave his books different places for people to pick up and read. That's the way that I felt I was having some kind of impact on society. But he made the difference. How did he make a difference? He made a difference by engaging people, by knowing what he was talking about, by bringing people in to listen to him, not alienating them and not telling them that they were horrible people, but getting them to come over and to believe the right way. He used to say, I'm not getting off until everybody in the world agrees with me. Sadly, he didn't live a million years, because it probably would have taken that long. But what he did was exceptional. We don't have a Rush now. There is no Rush. There is no one voice that drives the political fabric like he did. I wish there were. Now we have a whole bunch of people. You could say that Tucker, I would say that he's probably the closest. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about that. I haven't sat down and said, who would be today's Rush Limbaugh? Give me your opinion. I'll be happy to hear it. But there is no powerhouse like Rush now. He is the one who started the fire. And now instead of having one big bonfire, we have a lot of little fires, hopefully a lot of little fires all over the place. Those of us who believe in, well, an American reversion, taking things back to the way that they are supposed to be, right? The way things ought to be. The way things ought to be. Actually, that is an American reversion. Hadn't thought about that until just now. We, each of us, should be one of those little fires. Since there is no big fire anymore, there's no rush, each of us has to do what we can to be a small fire and to spread that message everywhere we can. Make our fires bigger. The more people that hear the message put forth in an attractive, reasonable way, the more people are going to add to that fire. This is the only way that we avoid some kind of violent revolution in the future. And every sane person, I think, realizes that political solutions are much preferable to violent solutions. For you, for your kids, for your grandkids, and all. It's a political fight. And in the end, all victories or defeats are essentially political. We're about to enter the year of the next presidential election. What effect can you have on that? I don't mean just going out and voting. What effect can you have by taking the message to people, all those people who can be persuaded, but aren't being persuaded because the only loud voices they're hearing are from the left? What if they were also hearing reasonable voices from the other side? They can be swayed. They are always swayed. The undecided are the ones who win and lose elections. The other side has been better at that than we have. We need to get better if we're going to have any hope. Now, I know that many people will say, well, I'd rather there just be a big collapse so we can start over again. Well, the violence that you would see in that is horrendous. How about if we try the peaceful way first? How about if we try the way of influencing instead of coercion? We're going to be dealing with a whole lot of things as this next political season starts. The other side, the Democrats, are just filled with corruption. I mean, corruption is how they do business. They are immoral, they are evil, they are traitorous, they are corrupt to the core. Can you convince some people that you know of that? You can, if you do it right. And so that's just what I wanted to share today. Rush carried the load for us forever. He built the foundation, but he's not here anymore. It's up to us. And it's up to us to try to convince. Try to educate. Bring these people to a better position. Try to turn the country around. Try to effect an American reversion. Okay. So let's think about Rush and what he was able to do. None of us are a Rush. At least I'm not. You might be. I don't know. I know I'm not. But can we do something with that small fire of ours? See what you can do. Let me know what you think on this. Remember that America needs a reversion. It needs you to be a part of it. It needs me to be a part of it. It needs all of us to be a part of it. If we win, things get better. If we lose, boy, I tell you, it's hard to think about, isn't it? So get out there and see what you can do. By the way, would you give this a like? Would you share this? Would you make sure that you're subscribed now that we're into a political season? I do want to build this channel. So do what you can, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.